Hello, everyone, and welcome to the annual general meeting of Aurania Resources Limited. Everybody's been waiting. I'm Keith Barron, the President, CEO, Chief Cook and Bottle Washer, and everything else. Everybody's been waiting for an update of our various projects. And of course, if you follow the company, you'll know that we are working in many different jurisdictions. I'm talking to you today from our Toronto office where we're based. And so I think today I'll start off with Ecuador. And of course, if you have followed the company for a long time, you will know that we've had a presence in Ecuador for a long time. My previous company, Aurelian Resources, found the Fruta del Norte gold deposit. It's essentially been doubled in size since we found that in 2006 and sold it in 2008. The idea to get back into Ecuador was essentially to do it all again with a much bigger land package, 208,000 hectares. And the company to date has spent over 40 million Canadian on exploration. And we have found a lot of different things. We've found porphyry copper, we've found epithermal gold, we've found lead, zinc, silver in what we call Mississippi Valley type limestone deposits, which goes for 14 kilometers across the concessions. We found layered embedded copper, silver, and sediments across 22 kilometers in our concessions. These are very big systems. These are the sorts of things that every little junior company wishes to find, but they become very cost intensive to drill out. And that's where we sit today. Now, we have spent, as I said, more than 40 million on this project, but we got hung up. We got hung up by the Ecuadorian government and something called the TASA. And the TASA, T-A-S-A, was a fee related to the amount of property that you had that was imposed by the national government of Ecuador on all the mining companies, exploration and exploitation. And it was supposed to be paying to fight illegal mining in the country. Now, I think that really it was just to plug a fiscal hole. The government expected to get $221 million per year from the industry. They ended up getting only 44 million last year, which was 35%. Really, only the companies that are in production were willing and able to pay this kind of money. Our company was assessed for 24.1 million US dollars, and obviously it was a very large sum. In fact, it exceeded our market cap at the time. And what happened, right now, as of yesterday, the mining chamber of Ecuador said that they had been notified by the federal governments that the TASA is going away, but not fully going away. It will still be have to be paid by companies that are in exploitation, officially in exploitation, on their concessions, but it is being waived for the exploration companies, which is very good news for us. However, it has not been established whether or not it's going to be retroactive. And from the date that this was imposed, for us, it's 14 million US dollars plus interest that are accounts payable to the government of Ecuador as far as our exploration goes in Ecuador. It is a very large sum of money. It's not a sum of money that we are prepared to pay. And so for the time being, our project in Ecuador is still halted. But I believe that this situation yesterday has opened the door, a crack, maybe even more than a crack. And probably the government didn't really consider the fact that companies that weren't able to pay this TASA last year are still unable to pay this year. And that $24 million is absurd for an exploration company with no revenues. Right now, they'll get about 42 million per year from the industry. It'll be coming from the production companies, assuming that they're going to pay. Now, at the same time, back in February of this year, 2026, the Chancellor of Ecuador in the federal government signed an agreement with the ambassador of the US so that US companies will get first shot at any project in Ecuador that has critical metals. This is very interesting and intriguing for us because silver is now considered a critical metal by the US. Certainly copper is. We have a lot of gallium with the silver lead zinc stuff. Our silver numbers off the project, which you can argue were not very significant a couple of years ago because of the massive rise in the silver price, they represent, in some cases, samples that are a couple of $100 per ton in terms of contained metals. Certainly, that would make it very economic, but it's mostly to do with the silver, a little bit of the copper. Our projects, as I said, are huge. They're massive projects. They will need large investments. So I've got, due to the information that came out yesterday, I'm trying to get a meeting now with a couple of representatives of the federal government within Ecuador and prepared to go down there. And I have been talking with the government now for a year and a half to resolve the situation for us, let us essentially go back to work. I think what we've got in Ecuador is potentially world class, potentially a home run, potentially much bigger even than Fruta del Norte. But we got to get there, and it's going to need some major investments. And the shareholders don't want to give money to the Ecuador government. They'd like to see the money go into the ground. I've got some negotiating to do with the government here, hopefully some negotiating, and we'll see what happens. And all I can say is just watch and see what happens. But a very good development yesterday. So I'm going to move on to Europe. Now, there's a certain couple of realities about Europe. European government has been making a lot of noise about critical metals over the last couple of years, the green energy movement and critical metals for EV batteries and all this kind of stuff, and getting away, having to be beholden to countries like China for gallium and germanium, Russia for nickel, just because politically it's not a place where they want to be. It's a vulnerability, just like it is for natural gas for Europe, getting all of their natural gas from Russia. They got to find alternatives. The geology of Europe is not such that it's packed full of minerals like Canada is, or even like Ecuador is. But nevertheless, there are a lot of possibilities that we have identified. But even though the national governments would love to see critical metal projects come to the fore, there's a very strong NIMBY movement in Europe. NIMBY means not in my backyard. So on one hand, the federal governments and the EU would love to see critical metals go ahead. On the other hand, there's some very vocal people out there in the constituencies who really don't want to see anything. Now, dealing with NIMBYs, dealing with NGOs is not something new for us, but you'll have to forgive me because sometimes my timing, and when I say that we're having meetings with various people, I can't telegraph those meetings because the NGOs at times have sent people to disrupt these meetings. And just in this day of online communication, that's not something that we want. First of all, talking about Corsica, we identified about a year ago that there was very little possibility for us as Aurania Resources proceeding ahead with Corsica. And that is really because of the independence movement in Corsica seizing upon our project, saying that it's neo-colonialist, and also the NGO people, because it's essentially on the beach. Now, these beaches are completely artificial. They're made up of mining waste from a past producing asbestos mine. Our intention is to clean up that waste, clean up the heavy metal component in that waste, and improve the environment for the seashore, for the marine environment. I need to partner up with people who understand that, and they have access to these people. But I want the shareholders to understand that of all the projects that we have, Corsica represents the least bang for our buck. It is a nickel cobalt plus PGE project, a little bit of gold, but it is small in relation to some of the other stuff that we're doing. So I can't let this thing become the number one time consumer for me, because there's only one of me. There are other things that we have in the portfolio that are potentially going to move the needle a lot faster and in a much greater way than Corsica. There are things going on in the background in Corsica. We haven't decided to walk away from it, but I'm not spending 100% of my time on Corsica. So we'll move to France. So in France, we have had a group working on sending our message out, talking to the communities, and so far they've been doing a very good job of community engagement. The areas that we're looking at are not in towns, they're not in people's backyards, they are in farming areas where there are woodlots. There are fields, open fields where they've been grazing cows. There's areas where they've been planting wheat and tilling the soil, that kind of stuff. So these are not built up areas where we want to knock anybody's house down or make a lot of noise that's going to cause the community to be angry with us. One of the things that we are doing right now, we've been taking a second look at the LiDAR. LiDAR is light direction and ranging. It's a way of they fly over the terrain with a helicopter. You can do it with a drone as well. And you fire a laser at the ground. This is non-destructive. It's not going to kill anyone or anything like that. It's just flashes of light. And these flashes of light are reflected back up to the helicopter and then recorded. And there's a very clever way that you can actually remove the vegetation from the ground and see the ground as it is. And what I'll do shortly, we'll put out a press release because I've looked at some of this data and we can see old mine workings in areas on our concessions, old mine workings, which are now in areas that can't be tilled because you can't put a plow over them. There's rocks and mining stuff that's exposed on surface, but you can see it under the trees. And when you strip the trees off, it becomes very obvious. And it agrees one-to-one where the structures are coming through. This is an obvious place to go and targets when we do get on the ground and we go ahead and we look at these areas and start taking samples and doing what we do, the whole panoply of things that we do for our exploration. So that's France, and I would say that it's been going slowly, but we are making progress. Really? You want me to talk about Italy first?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll talk about Italy. I was going to talk about Italy last because I think, quite honestly, Italy has got a chance to really move the needle for us in a big way. Now, we have had SRK, a major worldwide consulting company, working for us. They've done one field visit, which was last year. They gave me a preliminary assessment in December of last year. We have not been able to press release that at their request. However, I can say that the numbers that were generated from it are very compelling. It certainly, for me, makes this the number one project, number one priority of all the projects that we have in the company right now. It's such a very simple thing. It's essentially a massive hill of waste. Now, there's several hills on this project, but one in particular, that is the one that's been assessed. It was generated between 1970 and 1990 when the mine closed. Was the third largest open pit mine in Europe. And it generated in this hill 60 million cubic meters, at least 60 million cubic meters of waste. This is stuff that had gone through a plant to take out the asbestos. It was all crushed to -3 centimeters, so it's pretty small in size. And it was heaped up on top of a ridge simply because they had no more room to put it anywhere. And it's 250 meters high above this ridge. The ridge itself is about 250 meters high. So it's sticking out like a sore thumb. You can see it from 20, 30 kilometers away. You can see this big pile. They've attempted to rehab the area. They've put some mulch over top of it. They've planted shrubs and trees, but the roots for all these things will only go down about a meter or so. I believe that the thing represents a bit of a problem, especially in this time of global climate change. And I think it needs to be dealt with for various reasons. So I did tell the market that I thought in April of this year we would be doing drilling. SRK said to us for the PEA, the preliminary economic assessments that we authorized them to carry out for us, that they could not complete the thing unless we did 15 sonic drill holes on the main pile, and we did a 20 to 30 ton bulk sample of these tailings. They're dry stack tailings. They're not underwater. They're not in a swamp or in a pond or anything. This is a big high hill of tailings. But SRK wants us to go ahead and do that work ourselves as proof of concept before the PEA can be delivered. We thought that it would not be a problem to get the environmental license to go ahead and do this sampling. However, I guess the problem is that critical metals come under one law and mining comes under a second law. And remember, this is not mining, this is retreatment of tailings. This is essentially, we take these old tailings that are piled up and have no value to anybody. They're a hazard, if anything else. And we will process them and take the minerals out. So the metals nickel, cobalt, copper, iron, and chromium. We would extract them, and then the waste product, and this is after the material, the 3 centimeter material has been pounded away and ground down to about 70 microns in size. So it's a powder. It's like a very fine powder. That stuff, that powder, after it's gone through the whole process of having the metals extracted, will go to a secondary process, which will be right now it's being funded. The proof of concept is being funded by our sister company, Firestone Ventures Limited, and they have the rights under the MOU to carbon capture. So we believe that it will be possible to take this waste after it's gone through the grinding process and very effectively be able to react it with CO2 from industrial sources and then convert it to calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, and silica, all of which are benign to the environment. And we're talking about 100% conversion of the rock into these three chemical components, including all of the asbestos. The asbestos is actually the easiest thing to get rid of. It's very reactive. So the plan there would be, once that's converted into amorphous silica, calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, there are several choices here. You can make it, as one company has already demonstrated in Australia, you can make it into bricks for construction. Amorphous silica has many uses in chemistry, so you can sell that component, but also, and it's totally benign. There's amorphous silica everywhere in the environment. And what has happened, there is one company that's joint ventured right now with a company in Austria to react serpentinite rock, the same sort of rock that we have, with CO2 and to make refractory bricks for furnaces. And that's a very interesting concept as well. Lots and lots of stuff you can do here. The reason that this becomes hyper uber economic is because you're already grinding the material to take the metals out. And don't forget that this has already been mined. This is stuff that's piled up. It's already come out of the ground. We don't have to do any exploration. We know where it is. We can walk on it. You don't have to do any exploration. We know what's there, right? So there's no drilling, there's no blasting, there's no excavation into the hard rock. We will not be doing any mining here. This is retreatment of tailings, pure and simple. So that's the story on Italy. I hope and expect that we'll have some news about it quite soon. There's still a lot of work going on in the laboratory in northern France, in Nancy, where we have a 450 kilo sample that's been processed. That's ongoing. We now know, because we've had all the results from the ChemScan and microprobe operators, we know what the grain sizes are, so we can effectively know what size we have to grind this stuff in for beneficiation. That's essentially where you take the metals out of the rock particles. So we know what to do here. It's all very simple. It's all very straightforward. And we just have to keep moving it ahead. The status right now, we will be getting some meetings with the government soon. And I'm very optimistic that we will get everything we need in terms of permitting and be able to push this ahead. I apologize. I jumped the gun thinking that we would be able to do the sampling in April, and it sometimes comes right down to finding the person on the ground who's actually the one who makes the decisions. So that's the story on Italy. So I'll finish off with Iceland. Iceland Thor's Valley, lovely name for a project. It is a low sulfidation type of gold deposit, very similar type to Fruta del Norte. I've compared it to Hishikari. The reason I love this thing is it's less than 30 kilometers from the coast. And back between 1907 and 1923, there were two companies. One was a Norwegian company, the second one was a German company, and they were mining a vein at Thor's Valley that was 1 kilometer long. Their bottom cutoff grade was 8 grams per ton gold, 8 grams per ton. And they had a lot of stuff that was bonanza grade. Now, what they were doing, they were just putting it on a cart and sending it to the port, putting it on a ship. And in first case, they were sending it to Norway for processing. Second case, they were sending it to Germany for processing. The company that was running that operation closed in 1924. They were a victim of the Weimar inflation. They were shut down because they got caught up in the inflation, not because they had depleted the ore body in any way. So lots and lots of potential for more stuff to be found here. There was no activity for a number of years after that until 1940. And I've talked about this before, and this is just outrageous story. In 1940, Iceland was granted its independence from Denmark. The Americans and the British both had presence there with air bases. And this is during the Second World War. And of course, nobody wanted any German bases in Iceland where potentially they could attack the west coast of America and Canada. So both the Americans and the Brits stepped in. It was a chance for the Icelanders to lobby for their own country, their own national government, and they did that. And part of that whole process was that they wanted to establish their own university. in Reykjavik, the capital. With money from the Americans, they built an administration building. The national architect by the name of Samuelson did this. It's an incredible building. It's 3 stories high. It goes for 2 city blocks. And he wanted the rendering, the outside of this building, which is covered in a stucco on all 4 sides, to make a bit of an impact. Now, this is 1940, and it's a time when German U-boats are torpedoing any kind of merchant shipping in the North Atlantic. Samuelson wanted to use white quartz in the stucco render. This is a very common thing in Britain. They call it pebble dash. It was very common 20s and 30s and 40s all through Europe. It's in architecture on the outsides of the buildings. But where to get white quartz? Where do you get white quartz in Iceland? Iceland is a country that is predominantly made up of jet black basalt. And somebody remembered Thor's Valley. And they went to Thor's Valley and they quarried all the stone that they needed for the outside of this building. It was crushed and then it was pressed into the stucco. And so you can go there today and you can see the outside of this building, and it's all covered in pieces about 1 centimeter size, each one of them, all covered in stucco from the bottom of the building right to the roof line. And this potentially today is ore grade stuff. So I went to have a look at this building at the University of Iceland, and I had my face right up to it. I don't know what the students thought of me because I was taking pictures and filming and all the rest of it. They thought maybe some sort of Looney Tune or something like that. Why would this person be looking at this wall for any reason? But you can see banding, epithermal banding in these pieces of quartz. It's all very interesting. I know that the building is protected within Iceland, so don't expect it to come down at any time. And they run the facade through a recovery operation to get that gold. I might add, as a little bit of an aside, this is an interesting thing, but I used to work in the town of Kirkland Lake in northern Ontario, which many people will be aware of, familiar with. That town was a place that was really paved, the streets were paved in gold. When the old Lakeshore mine was operating, they were paving the streets for the very first time. They'd been dirt roads since before that. And they were using waste rock from the Lakeshore mine. And there was an employee who was illiterate. There were 2 piles, one with a sign on it that said ore grade and the other one with a sign that said waste. And he took it from the wrong place. And when I was working there in 1990, it was still possible to go after a rainstorm and see pieces of visible gold glittering in the asphalt in the roads, walk across the roads. It was really quite fun. Since then, they pulled all those roads up and put them through the mill at the Macassa mine. So all that gold is gone today. But it's a very interesting story. Anyway, that's just an aside. So the plan is that we have Jean-Paul Pallier is on site right now with the geologist who's going to be logging the core for us, who's in charge of the project. Our date to drill is August. We're talking to 3 different contractors, one in Europe, one in Canada, and one in Greenland. Right now, we're looking for a contractor for a bulldozer to move the drill around. We're figuring out where we're going to have a laydown area for the core and logging. We're going to twin 7 holes and do 1 step out. This is just for a first bite. Now, in the past, the best result that has come out of this has been 419 grams per ton gold and 1,600 grams per ton silver. That is bonanza grade stuff. It was over 40 centimeters. Okay, 40 centimeters is not very big, but there's a caveat to this. This was drilled with a drill that normally would drill geothermal holes. And the contractor was not somebody experienced extracting core, and their core recovery was about 50% or less. So what does this mean? That means that I believe it's only going to get better, and you'll get a wider interval. When you go and you twin a hole, you essentially set up your drill very close, maybe even less than a meter away from the existing hole. And we know where the holes are because they're capped. We can see them in the field. And you just drill on the same angle and to the same depth, more or less. And in this case, I very much expect that we're going to get stuff that's going to be very close to 100% recovery. Now, when I was out there in September of last year, there's not a hell of a lot to see on the surface now because the old stuff, including where that quartz was quarried, has all been reclaimed. You can see bulldozer marks on it where they've just filled it in with soil, and there's plants growing on it now. No trees, but lots of lupins. I took a sample I found under a bush. It was pretty obvious epithermal gold. I put pictures of this on our website. I had it assayed by ALS Chemex in Spain. It's only one grab sample, so it's not really worthy of a press release, but it came back 54.1% or 54.1 grams per ton gold and 25.3 grams per ton silver with anomalous arsenic, copper, gallium, moly, molybdenum, antimony, selenium, and tellurium. That's all to be expected in a low sulfidation epithermal system. It's certainly the sorts of things that we found anomalous at Fruta del Norte, except for the gallium. The gallium I can't really explain, but it's nice to see because gallium is used in gallium arsenide crystals, which are used in ships, and they're the only ones that are capable of carrying 5G. This is why if you order a car these days, you're going to wait 6 or 8 months for it to be produced and delivered to you because there is a worldwide shortage of gallium. So this is rather interesting for us. Not a huge number and not an economic number by itself. And maybe at the end of the day, it doesn't make any sense to recover it, but I just want to throw that out there. It's very early days for this, but these are very robust gold assays, typical kinds of things that you get in bonanza grade gold discoveries. And I'm very hopeful, otherwise I wouldn't be involved in this joint venture. Very hopeful that we will have some real success and some real fireworks here. That's my comments. I just want to read out, I'm going to read out, I got some questions from a gentleman. I'm just going to identify him as Mr. B right now, and I'm going to read this out and answer it. So, regarding the search for a major to partner with in Ecuador, what are the criteria that he feels would make for an ideal partner? Certainly, with this announcement about the TASA yesterday, this reopens things, I think, for us in Ecuador, certainly in terms of being able to find a potential partner. We have had 5 majors in the last couple of years to the project, last 3 years, not within the last year, but the last 3 years. And they've all been interested in the thing. But certainly when the TASA came out, everything went very quiet. And there are no majors that want to give massive amounts of money to the Ecuador government. They want to see the money spent in exploration. Regarding the search for a major, all I can say is that one of these companies, and I won't identify it, but one of these companies is an American company, and the Americans have signed an agreement with Ecuador now for critical metals. And certainly, if I could fix the situation, they would be the first people that I would go to. So that's that question answered. 2, after the funding raised in 2 most recent rounds, what are the funding statuses of the task at hand? Funding for drilling Thor's Valley, funding for Belangero, and exploration in Brittany. We don't have the amounts yet on what it's going to cost to drill Thor's Valley. We've got an approximate number, but we haven't selected a contractor yet. So it's a little bit early for us to go ahead and say exactly how much that's going to cost. Belangero, again, we've paid SRK a certain amount of money. There's a bunch of sunk cost already into this thing. But until we can get the green light to go ahead and do our sonic drill sampling and the bulk sample, I can't tell you how much that's going to cost. There was really no point in going ahead and finding a contractor for the sonic drilling at Belangero because I couldn't give him a date. hopefully that's going to come soon. And regarding exploration, Brittany is not costing us a lot of money right now. It's mostly concerned with going back through historical information and still working with the communities here, community engagement. Now, I will double underline that the financing is still open. Anybody who wants to get their money in, it comes with a full warrant and it will be open, but only for another week. Should you be interested? Now, Belangero, look, folks, if Belangero comes through and we can release all the information that we would like to release, we will have a re-rating on this company. And that's one of the reasons why I put my money into this thing, and I'm certainly into this placement right now. I am a very big believer that in that project especially. So number 3 here, obviously everyone wants to see the stock performance and people always ask whether the catalyst and when and so on. But my question is more in the vein of to what extent are potential funds receivable from warrant execution as a consequence of future increase in stock price being calculated for or relied upon for further exploration funding and obligations. Said more simply, what's the probability between future financing rounds versus warrant redemption funding? So where's the money going to come from? I hope, and my expectation is that we're going to come out with some very nice assays in Iceland. That's the whole reason for doing the project. And some very good news from Belangero and from the other projects as well. And that we will no longer be a 20-cent or less stock. That's the plan. And to get the warrants in the money so that the money that comes later will be from warrant redemptions, and we won't have to continue to go on and go through this horrible dilution to raise money. That's the plan, and we will execute the plan. And we've got all these things, irons in the fire now to make everything happen here. We were really hobbled for quite some time about Ecuador. It took a long time for us to really get things going on the ground. Iceland took more than 6 months to negotiate, but we're there now, we're on the ground, so things are really happening. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for supporting the company. And please, if you've got any questions, certainly at any time you can get a hold of Carolyn or get a hold of me, and I'll do my best to answer them. God bless everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.